All right. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background. I know you've been in our channel before, but share a little bit about yourself and kind of your journey to where you're at now.
Yeah, I'm Carlotta, and I am a UX designer at Millenay. We're creating an ILS system for libraries, but before this, I worked at another company as a UX designer, and prior to that, I was in sales and ended up doing Avocademy to transition into UX design.
Yeah. So I know we've touched on kind of your whole journey, foundation, CJ, all of that in other videos. So we'll link to that somewhere below here. I would love to talk to you about maybe like what are some like thoughts or what are some things you thought were true while you were learning design that after you were like in the real world you were like, oh, that doesn't matter that much, right? And I think a perfect example that I'm always trying to like tell our students is like a portfolio gets you a job, right? And your portfolio needs to have samples of your work. Um, and that's really it. Like it can be really simple. You don't need to stand out. You don't need to have these like crazy transitions and like all this weird stuff. Like as long as you just have samples of your work, you're good, right? And students are always like, I need to be unique. I need to do this. I need to, whatever. And they end up making it worse rather than helping, right? So I think that is something that as progress through your career, you realize like portfolios don't matter, right? Like you're not, I don't know. Did they even look at your portfolio for this second job that you got?
Yeah, they did, but
Yeah.
I did not have to like walk through a case study or anything. I think probably the most important thing that I realized is that when you go into UX UI, you think, oh, design's like the biggest thing. You have to be a great designer. You have to have the most incredible screens. And really, that is true for some things, but really you have to be able to defend why you designed it the way you did. And it's less about what it looks like and more the why. Like, why am I doing it this way? Because something can look really, really nice and not solve a problem or cause problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Do you feel that in your current job, do you feel that you spend more time like designing on Figma or on the design software, or more time like talking to stakeholders in meetings, trying to figure out like what the requirements are before you like dive into to work on the screens?
I spend a lot of time on my iPad just sketching and taking notes, and then I would say I have 2 meetings a week with um, librarians because that's what we're working on building a system for. But I am pushing to just get in front of an old software with a librarian right now to learn more. So I would say I spend more time trying to understand the problems and solve the problems and less time in Figma. Like once I've got all the pieces, then I can just hop in Figma and bust through it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think folks like specifically folks starting out, they're like, I need to learn Figma. I need to like jump in there or Adobe XD or Sketch, and they over index on like the tool itself. Um, when like really in the real world, it doesn't matter what tool they could, your company could change the tool tomorrow if they wanted to. They were like, no budget for this. We're using this, right? And now like it doesn't really matter how you use the tool as long as you're able to like visualize whatever you need to visualize in there, right? Um, what would you say is something that like while you were learning UX really helped you kind of have that like light bulb moment of understanding how it all kind of works together?
Yeah, something that I would tell like Avocademy students on actually is to like go in and look at someone's case study who maybe has graduated from Avocademy and see start to finish what the program's actually helping you create, what goes in a portfolio. And I think that tells a really good story of what UX UI is so that you can focus on what's important and less on Figma and less because everything that I learned in Avocademy, I don't know, maybe 30% of it's actually done in Figma. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just spitting a number out. But um, that really helped me bring in the like full picture of what I'm actually doing. And then I don't think I really got it, like really, really, until I got into my second job as a designer.
Yeah. What do you mean by really, really got it? Like what like changed?
Talking to actual users and listening to their frustrations and seeing like what they've been working on versus what we're trying to design. Because it's like Windows 95, that's what it looks like. And so just realizing the gravity of all the things that I can bring to the table and how that's like such a niche job
Yeah.
that can solve so many problems. I think to me, that's when I realized, oh, I can do big things with this. And I'm not just a graphic designer, because a lot of people like to say that. Not that
Yeah.
there's anything wrong with graphic design, just
Yeah. Yeah, you're solving real problems. You're not just making things pretty, right? Like you're actually looking at a system. So you're at your job, you're taking like legacy librarian softwares. I'm assuming they're not very far from like the little
that's what they look
index cards that they used to they used to use back then. Is that what
like.
you're working on?
No, they have like, I don't know if you ever played like Minesweeper on Windows
Yep.
95. They have like little windows that look like that, and they have it's awful. It's so awful. Like the input boxes are grayed out. Um, yeah, modals on top of modals.
um,
So we're trying to like one improve that, and then also offer things that are more modern solutions to their workflows.
yeah, cool. Um, I'm thinking through kind of your experience, right? You've so something that we teach in foundations, which you know is like we teach you the whole process, right? Like end to end, happy path. If you had all the time in the world, like ideally you would do some research either in interviews or surveys or whatever, and then you would kind of go through every step of the way. You know that that's very unrealistic and it doesn't work like that in the real world. How was your experience with that, right? Like I think in CJ we try and we tell you like, hey, this client needs wireframes. Like you're not doing interviews, you're not doing research. They gave us these two documents. Here you go. Like try and design something that works. But then when you go to the real world, I think it's even more shocking sometimes. Like I hear a lot of our grads be like, oh, we don't have personas or we don't do this thing that we learned in foundations, right? And now we've gone back and updated the course and been like, here, these are all tools and you're putting them in your toolbox and then you have to like pull them out when you have a problem that like requires using those tools and trying to make people understand how like you could do them in that order or you could do them backwards or you can do them in whatever order. How was that for you, like in your first job, kind of coming into it and being like, there is no like happy path process, just like figuring it out?
Yeah, I'd say my first job was kind of like just a hodgepodge of what could I offer and when do they need me. But like to touch on kind of what you said, there is no one's using all of that happy path of UX design or UI. So like currently we don't use personas, but I talk to users all the time, and so like I've kind of nailed down what their needs are, even if I'm not typing out a little persona card. Or we work in 2 week sprints, so I don't have time to go from the do the whole end to end process, and a lot of things carry over from the last sprint. um, so you wouldn't see that. Like if I were to take one of these projects and put it in my case study, you're not going to see all those deliverables. You're only going to see maybe 2 or 3. So I think that's important to understand, that not every project is going to have all of that. And but it is nice because there are times when I'm not required to put a user flow together. Our PM does that, but I might go in and just do it for my own sanity to see maybe they missed something, or maybe I've got a better idea or an alternative idea to how to solve the problem. So I think that's sometimes it's just to like make me design better. It's
Yeah.
not something I have to do, but it helps me see the problem end to end. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's not like a deliverable, right? Like you're not presenting user flows like in a PDF or sending it out or any, but it's for like your own internal process, right? Like
Yeah.
drawing out some boxes probably on your iPad or your computer quickly helps you understand like, okay, this is how the user's gonna use this.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think some companies value wireframes and some companies don't, depending on like who they've got next in line to help you do the design. So right now, I don't really wireframe. I just jump right into high fidelities after I've sketched something out.
yeah,
And I think all that said, like everything I learned at Avocademy, it helped me understand like if I'm in a particular situation, I can take these tools and use them as I need them. It's more of a toolbox. Like, hey, I need to learn, I need to do this. So I'm going to use the things I've learned. Like, I don't think I've used an empathy map since starting in UX UI. But it's nice to know that I can do it if I need to, and I know what it is and what the purpose of it is. So I think to answer your question, you don't use some of those tools, but it's super valuable information to have
yeah.
at any job.
Yeah, we I mean, because you've been around as part of, the Avocademy family for a while now, but we're constantly changing the curriculum. And right next Monday, so May 1st, 2023, I'll timestamp the video. I try not to do that in every video. I'm always like referencing a date. Next Monday, we're releasing a new version of the course, and we've actually removed personas. We've removed empathy maps, and we've added some different activities like jobs to be done. I don't remember right now, but like we've removed some of these things that are more like artifacts that are a little archaic, right? And like they're not really used. They're mainly used to like you understand the user. So we've replaced them with things that are a little bit more functional and are going to help individuals as they kind of go on, instead of like figuring out which random stock photo to use for this persona to like introduce bias to your process. We've instead are like creating these like jobs to be done and like other flows that help you kind of accomplish the same thing, right? Which is like put yourself in the shoes of that person and understand what they're experiencing so you can solve the problem more accurately. um, but I like what you said about like I haven't done a persona ever probably, but you still think about like the needs and the wants, right? And those things.
Yeah, and I
So
think too, like at bigger companies, or just it could be a smaller company, some of the things that I would associate with my job are being done by someone else. So like the PM might, like I said, do the user flows. At my last job, we had SMEs who did the personas and handed those over so that I didn't have to spend as much time researching. Um, I still had to look at the things, but I didn't have to take the time to do it myself.
yeah, yeah, and that's a big one too. And I think it's hard for folks to understand as they're starting out. And I say it over and over again. And I don't know if anyone believes me, but like roles, the same role name at different companies means so many different things, right? Like even my experience, I've worked as a UX designer three different places. In one, I was doing UI, even though I was called a UX designer, right? In another one, I never touched UI. I was doing more of like UX design and some user research. And in one of my jobs, I was literally only wireframing, like nothing else, just wireframes, right? I was getting the flows, wireframing, sending it to a UI designer. How's your experience been with the last two jobs, like this job and your previous job? Like, are you doing similar things, or has that changed over the two
Um,
jobs?
at my first job, I felt more like a consultant, like on really ridiculous things. Like, do we use a trash can icon or an X icon? And then having to present an argument for why we were using which on a button and uh, button placement. So, like, it was UX, but I wasn't touching the UI really at all. And I was being brought in on projects as needed by people who valued UX and not by the people who probably really needed to have me on their team to
Yeah.
work on something. Um, so I was doing no UI work for the mobile app or the software, but I could do it, which I think is really helpful and something important to point out that stakeholders, they don't usually know the difference in UX and UI. And so if you're trying to make an argument for something, it's very helpful to make it look like the end product. Otherwise, they get hung up on details that don't matter. So showing them a wireframe is confusing to them. So it is important, even if you are a UX designer, to be able to put something together, even if it doesn't look fantastic. And then at my current job, I'm a UX designer, but I do UI because we're such a small company. So maybe I started just wireframing, and I realized they are not getting my wireframes. Like, they want to see. I kept getting asked the same question: are these your final designs? Like, are you do anything else with these? And I'm like, no, I'm just showing you wireframes because I need to make sure that the content on the screen and the problem I'm solving is accurate before I invest time to make something look nice. And now I realize that 90% of it needs to be done before I show it, or it could be lost in translation.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question. Yeah, what is what's the hardest part of your job right now?
Oh man.
And it's being recorded, so just
Getting up every day. No, I'm kidding. The hardest part, I think, is there are just some processes that are so outdated with these systems that it's hard for me to wrap my mind around, because why would someone do something this way? And I have to put myself back 20 years and
Are you
say this.
talking about the system, the library
Yeah.
systems, not the
Yeah.
company?
No,
Okay,
my job,
yeah.
I don't think is hard. It's being empathetic to why things were done so differently 20 years ago. And just trying to understand, okay, it was done this way, but I don't have to design it to go that way. So I'd say being empathetic to very old design, and then also trying to solve it in a new way, like being creative to come up with a solution in a 2-week time frame for the sprint. Like, I can't dwell too long on it. Yesterday I actually said, okay, for the sake of you guys wanting this done now as a deadline, I will finish it, but I don't like it. Like, you have to be able to say it's not perfect, and that's okay, because design is so iterative, and we will come back to it. We will make it better, but just, I don't know, having to step away from things when I'm not happy with the final product, that's really hard.
Yeah, and I think that's something that comes with time. I remember like my first couple of like arguments or times where I felt kind of like I'm not being heard, and like I have to design this and I hate the way that I have to design it, and I don't have like I need to give them something, right? Like it's due. And being really, really upset. And it took probably like a year for me to be like, oh, it's not about me. Like, it's not about my design skills. It's not about me as an individual. Like, this needs to get done. And hopefully we can come back to it and like fix it, or do it in a better way. Do you feel like you're there? Like you're at the point where you don't take it personally?
Oh,
Or
I
are
don't
you
take
still
it
a little,
personally.
okay.
But it bothers me. The person that I am is not someone who can just do something wrong for the sake of doing it. And so I have to like step away and say, it's not important. I am getting paid. I'm not like doing anything wrong. This is what they want. Another thing too, that's not something I experience at my current position, but at my previous role, I felt like I had to pick my battles, and compromise a lot, because maybe what the business needs or wants is not what's best for the user. And so to kind of bridge that gap, that was a real struggle for me, a lot.
Yeah. And that's, I would say that to me is the most difficult part of being a UX designer, is having to be like the advocate for the user, but working for a company where like you work for the stakeholders, right? And the stakeholders want something for some reason, whether it's a business reason, a personal reason, lack of understanding reason of what the problem is. And like through research or just through your design experience, that like that is not the best thing for the user. And like, how do you advocate for the user, for your design decisions that typically kind of match up for the user? And then how do you compromise in a way that like still helps the user a little bit when you can't kind of get what you're pushing for.
Exactly.
And I think folks don't, kind of bringing it back to maybe some of the folks listening that are either like just starting to learn design or considering breaking into design. It goes back to that like Figma, right? Like Figma is not the best, like the main skill you need to think about, right? It's really about like articulating your design decisions, understanding why you're solving a problem the way you're solving it, really understanding the user so that you could come into a meeting and be like, hey, we have all this data. The person keeps doing this over and over again. So it really just makes sense to solve a problem this way. And it's about those soft skills and as you're in the job for a longer period of time, I think you start getting better at it and you start feeling a little more confident. But I know that when you all just start out, it's really hard with that like imposter syndrome and like, I don't know if I know how to do this, to sit in a room and be like, this is the right way to do it, or this is the data. Did you experience any of that? Like when you had to like advocate for something, but you were like, I don't know, I'm new, or not your personality. You just like went in there and like fought
It's
for it.
different. It's different for me
Yeah.
because my first job right out of Career Jumpstart was in a field that I just came from. So I was building a system for past me. So I knew
Yeah.
what I needed and what was a problem most of the time. So it was really easy for me to say, no, we have to do it this way. This doesn't make sense. Or this is what I would have needed or wanted. I was doing this process on paper. Why don't we put it on a screen?
Right.
I think, and you should know that I'm going to get on a soapbox here, but I think what's harder is to fight for people who aren't like the people running the company, because a lot of startups are ran by business people, usually, depending on where you are, men. And so designing for users that don't look or have the same experiences as those stakeholders can be really hard and challenging. Even like take all the demographics out of it. A businessman who's been doing like just throwing money into projects his whole life and has come from money has never worked the lower level job of the people using the systems. And so they're looking at it as dollar signs, and my job, I'm trained to feel for the user and what do they need and how can we make their life easier, not how can we make more sales. That was more challenging and still continues to be a challenge. Like, how can I advocate for all users, not just the ideal user?
Yeah. And I know we talked about this for a while before we started recording. I think, you explained it very well. I think inclusivity, right, in design, there's so many studies done around, design teams. I think we start by having more diverse design teams, right? I think if the design team is made of, people that don't all look the same, people that don't all think the same, people from all sorts of different backgrounds, right? Like that's why to me, it's important that like a person that has healthcare experience joins a team at like an ed tech startup, like a person that has teaching experience joins a team at like a healthcare startup, right? Like you're kind of mixing all of your past backgrounds, and like those teams I think are going to create the most inclusive products that kind of help everyone solve the problem and don't exclude anyone from the experience. um, I could talk about this for like 10 more hours for real. But I think you said it perfectly, right? Just like stakeholders having one sort of lived experience, and then, you as like a person that's trying to empathize with the user that just has a completely different lived experience than
Mhm.
those stakeholders. But yeah, and that's kind of what we're like Avocademy is here to do, right? Is help people from different backgrounds break into tech so we can create more inclusive products, more inclusive experiences. And it just starts with like more of us being in the field, right? So that we can then do the hard thing, which is like stand up and being like, actually, that's not what this person's experiencing. Like that is not their experience. They don't care about the sales. They're just for the 8 hours that they have to be. So let's make it, like enjoyable for them, or let's make it like bearable for them to like use the system while they have to be here.
Yeah, or just like fighting for accessibility can be a struggle. Like,
yeah,
for colorblind people, for people with ADHD, or just like human behavior. Like, what's the pattern of people's reading? Like, it can look nice, but is it the easiest solution for the user in that moment? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Again, I could talk all day about
yeah.
this, but yeah, just fighting for people who have totally different lives can be challenging.
Yeah. I wrote, I won't get too much into detail, but I wrote an article in my LinkedIn about like my experience going through airport security. So I was working as a consultant, and I was traveling, I was doing 4 flights a week. So I was living in Atlanta, I was flying to Miami on the weekend, and then I was flying from Miami to Tampa, back to Miami, back to Atlanta every week. So I was going through airport security 4 times a week. And as you can tell, like I'm like masculine presenting. So every time you go through those like little airport machines that you like put your arms up, the TSA person has to press like a woman looking button or a man looking button. That is how the application was designed. Pick one of two. So every time I go through, they like get confused. They press the man one. I come out and like my chest is lit up in the machine. And I'm like, you pressed the wrong button. I go back in the machine, put my hands up again. They press the right button and everything's good, right? So this is my experience. Over time, at first I would get really upset. Like men would try to like pat me down. It was like just terrible. Now I'm just like, you pressed the wrong button. But I wrote an article that was just like an angry letter to the company that designed this product. Like how, who was sitting in the room where they were like, yes, big screen, 2 big buttons, press one or the other, like why isn't a person like self-identifying when they go in, like my body looks more like this or my body looks more like that. And to me, it's like, it's things like that I think if different teams were in the room when designing, the experience would be different, right? And I wouldn't have to go and like every time I get to the airport, I'm like, am I gonna fight with TSA today or not? Am I having a bad day? Am I gonna be like, oh, you picked the wrong button? And it's the same conversation we were having earlier around pronouns, right? Like if you have the right people in the room, and that's like the me's in those teams being like, no, we can't use pronouns, or no, we can't assume someone's pronouns, or we need to ask them if we're going to use them, then I think we're slowly like making a difference in experience of other people. I'll stop talking. I know we're like way over time. Do you have any I know this was like a little bit of a different type of episode. We didn't like super dive into your transition, but do you have any advice for folks that are considering it, or probably people still listening at this point are people that are already going through the program or trying to learn UX UI design? Do you have any advice for folks that are like in it, or anything they should like prepare for once they hit the workforce?
Yeah, I always say the same things because I feel so strongly about it. So like if you're thinking about joining, at the risk of sounding like a salesperson, like do it. You should sign up because it changed my life. And I think it can change a lot of people's lives. And if you're already in it, I would just say make strong connections with the people who are alongside of you, because you will run into those people down the road potentially. And if you're a graduate and you're in a job, same thing. Be nice to the people around you, because you're in this industry now and people talk, and it's just so nice to see other people reaching out to you for opportunities, or do you want to meet up, just basic human nature. I don't know. It sounds so silly,
Yeah.
but like I value that more than what I'm doing day to day. And I think most people would. I think most people, it's like if I'm with a group of people I like and like the same things as me, then I'm going to have a good time, and less about, oh my God, I got to get up and go to work today.
Right.
I think that's
Yeah.
more important. But also, if you don't, I don't know, you got to like what you do too. But
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for all the pre-recording conversation, the recorded conversation. Really, really appreciate your time.